Right. So the topic was spinning yarns of epiphany. What's epiphany? A sudden realization or revelation of the truth, right? We say that facts are the door to truth. And therefore, one has to first talk of the facts before saying anything about truth or desiring an epiphanic moment. Are we really in touch with the facts, right? So we said, let's check that out, and we named the presentation as Missing the Obvious. Let's see to what extent are we really grounded in the facts. We'll be taking two sets of facts that we are calling as far and wide, that relate to something global, something macro, and facts that are more personal, more micro, more related to our day-to-day lives, right? And we'll see whether we really are in touch with them. So let's begin. Yes. First thing, as you look at this slide, you must realize that this is needed to be shown here because it is not being normally shown elsewhere. We are talking of CO2 emission as a proxy for mindless consumption. Where do these emissions come from? They come from energy consumption when it comes to all countries, heat consumption when it comes to mostly the first world, cold countries, transport, industrial production, and very, very importantly, food. Especially if you are a flesh eater, if you are someone who consumes a lot of so-called non-vegetarian food, animal products, be it flesh or dairy, then you are contributing a lot to carbon emissions. And what have those emissions done? Look at the stats. The pre-industrial levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere were 280. Even till 1950, it was 310 ppm. Currently, it stands at around 420 ppm. That's an increase of 50% over the pre-industrial levels. And we know what carbon dioxide does. It traps heat, the familiar greenhouse effect. Global mean temperature rise as a result of the greenhouse effect has been 1.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's only increasing and increasing at an increasing rate. Forget about arresting the temperature rise, it's only accelerating. The projected temperature rise by 2050 is 1.6 degrees, not Fahrenheit, but centigrade. And that's an optimistic estimate, mind you. The sea level rise is already close to 100 mm. And it can go up to 200, 300 mm by 2050. These are not just numbers. These are warnings of an impending catastrophe. And this is not something that we discuss in our daily lives. This is not a part of our daily discussions and the national discourse. 1.2 billion climate refugees by 2050, and that's not the worst thing to hear of. The worst thing is that we are probably already in the 6th mass extinction phase, and out of the previous 5, at least 3 were caused by an excessive presence of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, the same thing that you are witnessing today. Do you understand what mass extinction means? It means that as a generation, we have been so stupid that we are obliterating not just our own, but probably all the species on this planet, and that's happening within the next few decades. That's who we are, and that's how oblivious we are to the very obvious, present, stunning facts. How can then there be an epiphany or truth? Next one, please. Total, that's total. And we are talking of both Indian and international news channels. This is the kind of importance that we are giving to the all-round destruction that awaits us. Next one. And then when it comes to consumption, we are not just consuming industrial goods, not just fossil fuels, not heat, not just energy, not just food, but also something softer, subtler, which is data. You look at the kind of GBs that we are consuming. The GBs that an average mobile user in India is now consuming is close to 20. The average time that an average teenager is spending on his mobile screen is more than 8 hours now. And a lot of that is just social media trivia. That's what we are consuming. And the result is an exponential rise in misinformation, fake news, loss of creativity, and even loss of IQ. We'll come to that later. Yes. Now, we say because the global temperatures are rising and there is the climate catastrophe awaiting us, let's be do-gooders. Let's recycle plastic. Let's replace our old-style electric bulbs, and let's plant trees. The thing is, planting trees is way too insufficient now. It's not going to help. You look at the data, you require a land mass much greater than the size of India to be forested, to be planted with trees if you are to make any substantial impact. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So these 2 trees, 4 trees that we are thinking of planting are not going to help, because the cause is consumption. The cause is overpopulation. Who consumes? The people consume. And because there are so many of us, that's why the consumption levels are so high. Yes. And when it comes to consumption, see how we deceive ourselves. We say we'll plant trees. And that's another aspect of deception, very personal. We do not have money to study. We do not have money to invest in entrepreneurship. We do not have money for research and development. But we have all the money for bridal jewelry. India stands at number 2 there, and see the striking contrast. Number 150, number 190, what are the ranks in the last 3 points? 142, 144, 146. And what's the rank up there? First point. Number 2. Number 2. Education, per capita income, health spending, we are nowhere. But when it comes to gold, when it comes to weddings, we are right at the top. That's who we are. And are we in touch with these facts, or we do take these things as normal? If we really are in touch with these facts, you would be astounded. We would be shocked. We would be stirred into action. What are we acting when we are not even realizing, not even paying heed? How will we act? Next one, please. Extremes. An example of extremes here. Can you imagine roaming around in a t-shirt on Antarctica or on the Arctic? But that's what is happening. Look at the temperatures. And there is no typo there. We have not missed out on a minus sign. That's 38 degrees, yes, not minus 38. And that's on the, that's the kind of extreme weather events that we are already into. We are not forecasting. Nobody is acting as a doomsday warner or something. 83% increase in extreme weather events. Remember the Australian forest fires? Remember the European heat waves? Remember what is happening in Pakistan and Bangladesh next door, the floods? And remember what is happening in India as well, the frequency of cyclones? An 83% increase over just the last 1 or 2 decades. That's where we are. Flood and other water related, that's just a number, $5.6 trillion by the next decade or by 2050. To put things in perspective, that's more than the current GDP of India, right? We are not yet even at $4 trillion completely. But the economic loss comes later. It's the human loss that's the worst tragedy. And we are yet to fathom the magnitude of what we are already into and neck deep into. But we talk of other truths. We talk of metaphysical realities. We talk of knowing the unknown and even the unknowable. when we do not know even that which is present right in front of our eyes. We do not know the obvious facts that stare at us and would destroy our lives, but we want to know of some hidden mystical reality. How will that work? Next one, please. Extremes. Just as we saw extreme weather events, look at the extremes here as well. We are contrasting the far and wide with the up and close, the near thing, and saying that be it the distant reality or the immediate one, we are equally in oblivion, right? Look at these extremes. And we are talking of dollar billionaires here, mind you. India ranks third when it comes to the number of billionaires in the world. And 80% of Indians earn less than rupees 10,000 per month. If you earn rupees 20,000, 25,000 a month, you are in the top 10 percentile in India. That's where we stand. The percentage of population below the poverty line is still 20%. And that's when we have defined the poverty line on bare sustenance terms. We have taken the minimum number of calories a person needs to survive. And then we say, okay, for these calories, what is the minimum amount of food grains, etc., that you need to consume? And based on that, we have drawn the poverty line, which is a very inhuman way of drawing the poverty line. And still, 20% of us are below the poverty line. And yet, we have a vulgar accumulation and display of wealth going on. The inequality is increasing continuously. You know of the Gini coefficient, right? And you know of how it has only been increasing in the world and also in India. Yes. Now, killing, violence. There is a violence that is happening on a global scale, on a macro level, and there is a violence that is happening right in our households. Let's first look at the former one. Fish, gone. Number of species that are getting extinct every day. Do you know that is more than 100 times the natural rate? The natural rate is that 1 or 2 species will go extinct every day. And that's a natural thing that has been happening since the last millions of years. But today we have exceeded that rate by 100 times. Some studies say 1,000 times. Even as we speak, a few species have gone extinct. Can you imagine the devastation, the total obliteration of life itself? That's what we are doing. And we remain blissfully ignorant. We behave as if nothing is amiss. All the fisheries gone, would we survive? 2048, it's as if fisheries are out there somewhere isolated, disconnected from us. Would we survive if they are gone? Please tell me. And India. Relate the last 2 points. Very few people realize that milk and beef are synonymous. Very few people realize that. We do not bother to inquire what happens to all the cattle after they stop yielding milk. As young, educated, inquisitive minds, should we be that complacent, that ignorant, that oblivious? Isn't there a direct relation between our dairy consumption and our beef production and subsequent export? But we don't mind. Next. Yeah, killing them. So we are not just killing the cows, the buffaloes, the fish, the entire wildlife. Look at who else is being killed. 189, that's rock bottom. I wonder if there is any country below us. 920 is the ratio. Where are those missing 80 girls? And if you are a killer, why would you spare your own daughter or wife? That's the worst kind of genocide going on in India. But we don't bother. We behave as if we are an educated, enlightened, empowered country, especially when it comes to empowering the other gender as well. Think of killing. Killing happens everywhere because the killer is the same. The fellow who can kill an innocent animal just for his pleasure and profit, why would he spare an innocent girl? She would be killed because he knows there is a cost to bear and then there is a dowry to gift and all such things. Female labor participation rate, 25%. Worse still, it is falling. Education levels among women are increasing, their labor participation rate is falling. Over the last 20 years, it has actually fallen. More women were at workplaces than they are today. 2 decades back, the proportion of women working was more than what it is today. Women are withdrawing from workplaces. 73% of them, even if they continue to work, they leave their jobs after work. And that's not really an informed and voluntary choice. It is to do with the social conditions and the cultural conditioning a lot. We talk of farmer suicides, and that's a very tragic thing, right? The newspapers are all full of farmer suicides. And that is something we must address, obviously. But what about the housewives? And does anybody bother to inquire what our cultural institutions are doing to the woman, to the point that she is compelled to die by suicide? And we are missing that. As young students, when you talk to each other, I'm asking you, do you take up these issues? Do these form a part of your daily conversations? They hardly do. Next. Loss of biodiversity. And we'll be talking of another kind of loss next, right? This is a loss far and wide, as is biodiversity. This is biodiversity loss. I just addressed that. The extinction rate has exceeded the natural rate not by percentage points, but by manifold, but by multiples. 1 million animal and plant species threatened with extinction. Do you understand? Threatened with extinction. They are not just threatened. Their numbers are not just reducing. They are going extinct. We understand what extinction means. They'll never return. We are not talking of a few members of the species. We are talking of the last member of the species. It's gone forever, never to return. And we are talking of not one such species. We are talking of 1 million such species. Look at the third point. Let it sink in. The only mammals that are surviving today are the ones that we use. All other mammals we have wiped out. So if you want to survive on this earth, we have colonized, monopolized it to such an extent that if you want to survive on this earth, you have to be usable to human beings. If you're not usable, you will be killed. So, goat, cow, buffalo, sheep, camel, only such mammals that are of use to us have been allowed to not just survive but multiply. We forcibly multiply them, right? That's the reality of the animal farms. We forcefully multiply them, and all other animals, think of the millions of mammal species, we have completely wiped them out. That's who we are. Wild mammals represent only 4%, obviously. Yes, next. We talked of loss of biodiversity. Here is the corresponding loss of creativity. Have you heard of something called the Flynn effect? Do you know that each generation is significantly lower on IQ than the preceding one? And that has been happening since the last 40-50 years, since the advent of television. And now that has been compounded with the internet. We are losing IQ at the rate of 3 to 5 points every decade. Isn't that astounding? Look at the other points. Newspaper reading, magazine reading, declining sharply. When was the last time you came across a great new poetry book? A great new publication? Who cares for poets now? Innovation, creativity, intelligence, empathy, all of these things are being lost just as we are losing biodiversity. The loss outside is also the loss inside, and we are not seeing that. Yes. Superstitions. 50%, almost 50%. You add up those numbers. That's 10, 24, 14. That's almost 50%. 50% people still do not completely believe that global warming is happening and it's anthropogenic, which means they won't really participate in any climate activism. Isn't that superstition of the worst kind? And that same kind of superstition is reflected in something else. Look at what is happening on social media these days. Superstition rules.
And if you can propagate superstition, you will very soon be a superstar. Is that not the rule now? Huh? Look at this. Miracles, yes, they do happen. And that's not just something that Indians believe in. Faith healings. No. The scientific system of medicine won't help you. Come to all the other kind of mumbo jumbo and the number of deaths that is causing, that's going largely unreported. So a mind that does not care for the truth is what is called as superstitious, right? We do not care for the truth when it comes to macro events, and we also do not care for the truth when it comes to things in our personal life. So small things. You want to proceed for an examination. Somebody tells you, well, you should wear this thread or take some yogurt before you leave. And that same kind of harmless looking thing is what becomes the climate tragedy and subsequent extinction as well. So please don't take those little superstitions lightly. They are killing us. Good.